Smell that. So this is my tomato main stem, goes all the way up here. You can see that branches come out from all over the place and it spreads out pretty wide. The way that most tomato plants will grow, this one's an indeterminate tomato, so it will just keep growing if it can. The other kind is a determinate tomato plant, and it will only grow to a certain size or only put on a certain amount of fruit, and that's all it will do for its season. So you can see sort of along the way, see how this would have been, that would have just been some sick leaves that I cut off, and from the same spot it has sent up new growth, which then, let me just move this, which then ends up being a whole new, nearly a plant on its own. It's another leader stem it's called, and so it will start growing and being as big as this one I've got here. It goes all the way, and they just keep growing, and they will keep off that, and they will keep on putting off new growth in all of the middle, in the little armpits of the tomatoes, and then that little thing there will then become as big as this whole thing is that's growing out, and it will do that from all of the little armpit spots. I don't have as many on here at the moment because can you see there where it's sort of healing over? I've just recently plucked out all of those extra ones. The same there as well. I've plucked out all those extra ones because I want this plant to just focus on the fruit that it's already putting off and some of the blossoms that it has already starting to grow. But if you wanted to, you can take tomato cutting. Is super easy. You can just chop it straight. I'm going to chop it straight here, and then I will be able to replant this. But to give you a demonstration, I'm going to find another one that I can show you. Alright, so let's try this one. See how there's still some fruit down here, but I'm going to take this and replant it. So I'm going to cut it there. So I'm just going to cut it just above there. So now I have this piece here. So this is the tomato cutting that we've just taken, but we don't want it to keep all of this other extra growth because that's going to take too much energy for the plant to sustain while it's trying to grow its own roots and support itself into another pot. And we also don't need the blossoms here because the plant is going to be trying to put in energy to grow these little tomatoes. So we're going to take that off. And can you see there's some more blossoms here? So we're going to chop that little bit off. So we've just got this little bit left. It's got another little baby leader stem that it's trying to put out. So we don't want it to be putting in energy to making that grow. So that's essentially what this whole thing is. And it's just starting again from this little bit. So we're going to pinch that little bit out there. Now we have this much left, so we're going to go and plant that into a pot. If you've looked closely at tomato plants before, you'll see that all along the stems they have like little furry hairs. All of those, if you plant them into the soil, get them some moisture, each of those little hairs is going to form roots. So it's actually quite good for tomato plants if you can start them from seed and then transplant them out into the garden. You're going to give them a helping hand if you bury all of this, like this far down, into the soil, so that then it's going to have a nice strong root system to start with. So I've got my pot here. I've just put in some plain potting mix, and then I'm going to put some mushroom compost on top once we put the tomato transplant in here. Just want to make a nice deep hole can see I'm getting quite close to these bottom leaves here, and you don't want leaves touching the soil because that's how they can get disease and sick. So I think I'm actually going to take that one off because it only needs, you don't want to take too many leaves off, but this bit should be enough to keep it, to get itself enough energy that it needs to keep growing. So I'm just going to chop this bit here. Remember, when you're planting or transplanting things, the soil is going to compact down further. But because this is such a big plot, and it's only for a season at the moment, I didn't want to fill it all the way up to the top because I'll be able to use it for something else once I'm finished with the tomato plant. I also have another little tomato branch that I cut off the same plant that I have in a little jar of water inside that I was possibly going to make a plant out of later. Alright, and I'm just going to put some mulch on top as well, just to make sure that it keeps in the moisture, and to also to protect the leaves from touching the soil, give it a little bit of a barrier. So I'm just going to be using some of this sugarcane mulch. Some plants you need to be careful with how close you mulch to the stem, because sometimes it can, if you mulch it right up against it and the mulch is really wet, it can cause cholera to some plants, but tomatoes, it doesn't matter. And now, of course, need to water it in and give it a good watering, because it looks already starting to look a little bit droopy here. But over the next couple of days, it's going to droop a fair bit while it just goes through the shock of being cut off from its main plant and being planted into soil where it hasn't developed roots yet. So you just want to make sure you keep that soil nice and moist, water every day, and it should perk up in about a week or so. I would avoid having it in a lot of strong sun just while it's getting established. Maybe put it in a shadier spot just while it's developing those roots. So I'm also just getting a trellis ready because there hasn't been a root system developed for this plant yet. You won't have to worry about stabbing in some stakes and disrupting any of the roots. So it's a good idea to do it now before any of the roots have started to grow or get established. So that's in. The pot's just slightly too small for it, but this is the kit that I've got to use for a lot of things that I use in the garden anyways. And it's not going to work, it's just if you wanted everything to be perfect I will get a bigger pot down the bottom, but this pot is plenty big for the nutrients and everything that the tomato is going to need to grow, and it still works quite well. It's just the slight bending in of the post down the bottom because the bottom of the pot is not as wide as the top, but this is going to do fine for what I need. So this is the other tomato cutting that I was talking about that I just had in my kitchen in a jar of water. I just keep changing the water when I need, and you can actually see already, see that white thing sticking out? That's a root coming out. So it's already, there's a couple on the other side, it's already starting to develop its own root system. So you can do it that way. You can put it in some water for a little bit and let it develop some roots and then plant it out. Or you can do what we've just done today, cut it off and whack it straight in the ground. If you're growing tomatoes and you ever cut this bit, off, you're actually going to stop it growing. So cutting that top off there, that's where all the extra new growth comes from. That's how it like expands out. yeah, so if you cut the top off there, it's not going to grow anymore. You're just going to have a couple of branches of leaves because you can't see any new growth in all of these little elbows and down there. If there was, then you would get new growth coming out from somewhere else. So if you did accidentally cut the top off of one of your tomatoes and it does have, there's a tiny little bit of growth in there. If it does have a little bit of growth coming from one of those little bits, you will actually get more tomato growth growing out from there. So that's kind of cool to remember. So this is the little guy, all finished and watered. So he looks pretty small there, but remember he's down 30, nearly 25 centimeters below here. That's how long he is. Here is where he's growing from, so that's going to keep going up and up. And as he grows, these leaves will get larger and they will probably dip down and touch the ground. And once you have more growth coming up from here, you can prune this off as well, because you still don't want the leaves touching even the sugarcane mulch there as well. You want to try and keep them as healthy as possible. So also remember, also something to remember is that when you're going to get a cutting, make sure you've got a nice healthy one. You don't want to have any yellowing or browning or spots on the leaves of another plant that you want to grow. So that's how I plant cuttings from tomatoes. And I was really keen to do this one because the plant that I've got in the garden of this one has done so well and has been so healthy. So I'm really keen to get another one growing out of this. It's also a lot faster than going back and starting seeds from packet and waiting for them to germinate to then pot up. It's so much easier to just cut a bit off and put it in the ground, or put it in some water and get some roots going first and then pot it up. I'm just having a look at our tomato tomato that we transplanted the other day, and it's been looking actually really good. It feels quite strong. I haven't seen it drooping, but maybe I've only been checking it when it's been in the shade, so I might come out and have a look when the sun's actually on it. I picked this position because it is quite shaded by our stairs right here. So I have been trying to baby it, and I've been watering it every day. I just watered it this morning again. So it's been about 2 months now since I planted out my tomato cutting. So I'm just checking in with its progress. I've been obviously watching it since I've been here, but I wanted to actually show you guys what it looks like. So this is it here. It's gotten a lot taller since last time. It was sitting around about here, I think, when I first planted it. And it also is starting to set fruit. I believe I possibly did actually pinch off some of the blossoms that had started to set when it was a little bit lower, but I wanted to let it just focus on getting a good root system and getting nice and strong. But these ones, I think I'll let them go and just see how it is. See, I've got another sucker in there. I might take that one out. So this is essentially a very small version of what I grew this from, so that's kind of neat to see. You can see down here there's another one. So any of these, if you don't want any extra branches bushing out from the plant like that, you just need to pinch them out like that. It's easy to do when it's small. If you let them get really big, like the cutting that I took from this, then it's probably better to use some proper scissors so that you don't risk injuring the main plant. I didn't end up keeping these stakes in. I actually took them out because we did have some chilly days, and so I took the stakes out and I just put the pot into my greenhouse there to try and keep it warm for those cold days. It's a lot stronger now, so I'm not as worried. Slightly warmer now, so I think today is going to be maybe 20 even, which is crazy for winter here. I'm going to keep it out in this pot and leave the trellises on it, and we're going to see if we can get some fruit off it. Even if it doesn't set much, if I can keep it healthy and growing through winter, it'll pick up again when the days start to get warmer and longer. So I thought that was pretty neat. It's good to finally show you guys the end result. And now I'm going to get on to potting up some of the other tomato starts that I have, because they're getting quite nice and big, and I want to pop them into their separate containers so that I can do essentially the same thing, or at least just keep them nice and healthy so that I can plant them out later when spring comes back around. I'll give you a sneak peek of those. This is them here. Aren't they looking great? They've got really nice strong stems, nice and green and healthy, but they are starting to get a little bit crowded out, and I do have some little smaller ones growing in there, so I'm just going to separate them out, and I am probably going to use the greenhouse just to help them in their growth in case we have some cooler nights. I was keeping them inside on some of the cool nights, but now that they're bigger I do need to put them into different pots, and because my cutting is a lot stronger now, I'll keep it out and I'll move these into the greenhouse. So we'll see how that goes when spring comes back around. Hopefully we'll get some more tomatoes.